why the first page of the contract matters more than you think. As we transition from Chapter 1 into the actual contract, everything we discussed, contract validity, formation, negotiation, and drafting, now comes together on page 1 of the Commercial Real Estate Purchase Contract. This section is often overlooked because it seems straightforward, but in reality, it sets the legal foundation for the entire transaction. If the property is not properly identified or the parties are not correctly named, the entire contract can be challenged. Under Arizona law and the Statute of Frauds, ARS per 44101, the agreement must clearly identify the parties and the property to be enforceable. A mistake here is not minor. It can invalidate the contract. Identifying the parties. Who is actually in the contract? In commercial real estate, identifying the parties is more complex than simply writing a buyer and seller's name. Many transactions involve entities such as LLCs, corporations, partnerships, or trusts. This means you must ensure that the correct legal entity is named and that the person signing has authority. For example, if a property is owned by Desert Holdings LLC, but the contract lists the seller as John Smith, there is a mismatch. Even if John Smith owns the LLC, the contract may not be enforceable unless properly corrected. This ties directly back to capacity from Chapter 1, Authority Matters. Under AAC R4281101, you are required to exercise reasonable care. This includes verifying ownership through title reports or public records and ensuring the correct party is listed. Failure to do so can expose you to liability under ARS, paragraph 32-2153. Property description, more than just an address. The property description is one of the most critical components of the contract. While the physical address is helpful, it is not legally sufficient on its own. The contract must include a legal description or reference to one that can be verified. The 2026 Commercial Purchase Contract specifically allows for the legal description to be attached or provided by escrow. This is common in commercial deals where properties may include multiple parcels, easements, or complex boundaries. For example, a commercial property in Mesa may include multiple assessor parcel numbers, APNs, shared access easements, and parking agreements. If these are not properly included or referenced, disputes can arise over what exactly is being conveyed. This connects directly to risk management from Chapter 1. If the property is not clearly defined, neither party truly knows what they are buying or selling. Fixtures, improvements, and personal property, what is included. One of the most misunderstood areas in commercial contracts is what is actually included in the sale. The contract typically includes fixtures and improvements, such as HVAC systems, electrical systems, and built-in components. However, leased items or personal property may not be included unless specifically stated. For example, a warehouse may have leased solar panels or equipment that is not owned by the seller. If this is not disclosed and addressed in the contract, it can create significant issues during escrow. The contract requires the seller to disclose leased items within a specified time frame, and the buyer has the opportunity to approve or disapprove them. This ties directly into disclosure obligations and due diligence, which we will cover in upcoming sections. Real-world example, when property identification goes wrong. Let's walk through a real-world scenario. A buyer enters into a contract to purchase a retail strip center in Phoenix. The contract includes the main parcel, but fails to include an adjacent parking lot that is essential to the property's operation. During escrow, the buyer discovers that the parking lot is on a separate parcel, not included in the contract. The result? The buyer either renegotiates, delays closing, or walks away from the deal entirely. This situation highlights a key principle. What is not written in the contract is not part of the deal. Properly identifying all parcels, improvements, and rights associated with the property is critical. Connecting parties and property, the core of enforceability. At its core, the contract is an agreement between specific parties about a specific property. If either of these elements is unclear or incorrect, the enforceability of the contract is at risk. Arizona courts rely heavily on the written terms of the agreement. If there is ambiguity in the identification of the parties or the property, it may lead to disputes or even render the contract unenforceable. This reinforces the importance of precision in drafting. How this section connects to the bigger picture. This section sets the stage for everything that follows. Once the parties and property are clearly defined, the contract can move into financial terms, due diligence, disclosures, and remedies. Think of this as the foundation of a building. If it is not solid, everything built on top of it is at risk. As we move into the next section, we will begin discussing earnest money and consideration, which bring financial commitment into the transaction and further solidify the agreement. Online discussion. Why is it important to correctly identify the legal entity in a commercial contract? Answer: because the contract must be between the correct legal parties to be enforceable. If the wrong entity is listed, the agreement may be invalid or challenged, especially if the signer does not have authority. What is the risk of relying only on a property address in a contract? Answer: a property address is not legally sufficient to define what is being sold. Without a legal description or accurate parcel identification, disputes can arise over the exact property included in the transaction. How can leased items create issues in a commercial transaction? Answer: if leased items are not disclosed or addressed in the contract, the buyer may assume ownership of items that are not included, leading to disputes, renegotiation, or cancellation of the deal.